Hello and welcome to the Green Profit Academy Pros podcast. This show digs into the challenges in growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit. I'm Christeen Era.
And I'm Steve Bousquet. We are the green industry experts in profit, growth, and leadership.
Hi Steve, how you doing?
Good, Christine. How are you doing today?
I am doing good. It's a good day for a good day, for sure.
It's a nice day here in Connecticut. The snow never showed up, and it's nice and bright and sunny, so people are in a good mood.
Well, I think it's going to come to us tomorrow. From what I understand, we're going to get some of your snow that you didn't get.
You can have it.
So in today's episode, we're going to discuss how to lead from your strengths. What are strengths? Can your strengths influence us? Like how our strengths can influence us and how to become more aware of them. And we're going to give a special offer at the end of this podcast. So definitely listen in, and we're going to give you a link of a really great thing that you can do to understand your strengths more.
Right. So first off, we want to start, Christine, with what is a strength and how do we develop our strength? So a strength is really, it's a natural talent combined with a skill and knowledge. So when you have all three of those together, they make up a strength. And strengths are made up of themed talents. In Gallup Clifton Strengths program, we learn about themed talents. Themed talents are things that come natural to us. They're easy. We've been doing them our whole life. You know, for you and I, it's talking. Communication is one of our top 5 themed talents. For other people, it is strategic thinking and being just strategic. And you have strategic as one of your top 5. And a strategic theme talent is, a strategic is able to look at a challenge and come up with multiple ways of dealing with that challenge and fixing it. So strengths are a combination of our natural theme talents, our skills that we've developed, and the knowledge that we have obtained. And so what comes natural to us is, like I said, for us, it's communication. For other people, they have a high restorative theme, and high restorative themes, they fix stuff. When they see something, they always want to problem solve, they want to fix it. And so people in construction, engineers, they typically have high restorative in their theme talents. So themes are just these natural abilities that really, when they show up, they give us energy. So we know when we're doing an activity or doing something that gives us a lot of energy during the day or during the week, that is usually showing us that we're operating in our top theme talents and our top strengths.
Yeah, so I think that's a interesting concept, because I have learned about Clifton Strengths and strengths over we'll say probably the past 5 or 6 years. It was introduced to me, and at first I was like, what is this? Like, this is just another assessment that you take. But then when I took the assessment and I identified my top 10 strengths and even like my bottom 5 strengths, it really helped me understand why I feel the way that I do when I do things, or when I'm involved in certain activities, or tasks that I have to do, or a role even in my company or a role in my personal life. So understanding those strengths, it helped me see, where my natural abilities were and why I gravitate towards those. And it kind of gave me that permission to get out of my head of who I am, as a person and how I function, and just really embrace, that feeling of, I like to communicate. I like to, be strategic. It's something that I'm good at. I can see gaps in things in a faster, much quicker way than other people that don't have strategic. Like right out the gate, I'm like, hey, this is missing, or how can we fix this problem? And it really helped me understand who I am and how I can kind of help and support people at my business and also in my personal life.
Yeah, and it shows up in all places of our life, at work, with our family, in our activities, in our hobbies. So what we're going to be talking about today is Gallup's Clifton Strengths. And when you take this assessment, the Clifton assessment, it lists your strengths 1 through 34, and your top 10 are where we mostly focus on, because that's where our strengths are really showing up for us and allowing us to be the best people, the best person in relationships, the best leader, best boss. It allows us to have our best day at work. So that's really what we're going to focus mostly on. But you did bring up like the bottom 5. So that would be 29 through 34 are our bottom strengths, our bottom theme talents. And that doesn't mean that we can't ever have those show up. They're just not natural for us, and we're kind of blind to those. But we definitely need to be aware of those, because that enables us to say, hey, we want to have people on our team that don't have the same exact talents as us in strengths. So what are our bottom 5, and how can we have somebody on our team to support us in a way, and how can we show up for someone that has a bottom 5 with our top strengths and support them? So it's really about, who's on your team and being aware of what our top 10 strengths are, what our bottom 5 are, and then building teams around those that awareness.
Yeah, and I love that idea, because I enjoyed working with people that have restorative, for example, in their top 10, and I never understood why. And then I started looking at my bottom 5, and my number 34, my very last strength, is restorative. In my mind, I'm like, nobody has time for that, but I see the value. And so the people that are on my team that have high restorative, they restore things for me, and I don't have to do it. But I loved working with people that have restorative, in their top 10, because it brought me joy just knowing, like, oh, they're going to do that. I don't have to do that. I don't want to spend time in that. I'd rather spend time over here. So that gave me some insight, on how I show up and other people show up, and what gives me energy.
And you'll notice that a lot of times, so what I've noticed is that people who it'll come across as procrastination or delay or indecisiveness, what happened is they ran out of their strengths. So what I'm noticing is most people can go on a project and do about 80% of the project, and it looks like that they're procrastinating. But what happens was, just like a car runs out of gas, they ran out of their strengths. And that's why I love the question, who's on our team, and partnering up and pairing up with people that have strengths that we don't, so they can carry the ball forward that last 20% on the project and move that project, to completion. I've noticed when people work as teams, things get done much quicker, and the project ends up being of much higher quality, because when you pair strengths together, they support each other and they have each other's back in a really, really positive and constructive way. So, just being aware of that is a huge part. And I have inadvertently, even before I was involved in the Gallup and Clifton Strength, had surrounded myself with high strategics, and I don't have strategic in my top even 15. So I had your strategic number 1, my wife's strategic number 2, my good friends are strategic number 1 or 2, my chief operating officer at my landscape company is strategic number 1. So I had surrounded myself inadvertently, and it just ended up being because that's where I can build partnerships, and we can support each other without stepping on each other's toes, and we support each other in a really positive way. And that strategic is just who's on my team is the strategic. So it just is how it was interesting to see it on the assessments. But that's just how I built my little Steve world around me in a sporting way. So that, it's very fun.
Yeah, I have really enjoyed learning about, strengths and how they can, impact us. And so that brings me to my next question is, how can our strengths influence us, and how do they show up?
So our strengths influence us because they show up every day, and it's so natural for us to step into our strengths, and it's everywhere in our relationships. It's at work. The most favorite things we like to do at work, typically in that gives us energy and we love, typically that's when we're in our strengths, in our theme talents. And that's how they show up. They show up by how we support other people. They show up with how we lead. I have I have high communication. I'm a cheerleader. I'm an encourager. I'm an arranger. So I'm always looking for, how can I encourage people? How can I move them in places that they can succeed? Where if someone has a different set of theme talents, deliberative, strategic, they're going to lead with their deliberative and strategic, which is more, how do we solve problems? How are we going to address this? And let's check all the facts. Let's take some time to make sure we're going to move this forward. So they're going to be more involved, hands-on, with their leadership. So it's really recognizing our strength talents and how we show up in relationships and leadership roles and what gives us energy at work.
Yeah, it almost makes me think about, as well as how maybe our strengths, we're so used to living in them and using them that it might be hard for us to put ourselves in other people's shoes. And we ask those questions of like, why can't this person do this? Or what, why am I already at this conclusion and they're still kind of looking at it, trying to figure out how it works, And so there can be that like frustration of our strengths are showing up for us, but not being in tune with how other people around us, how maybe their strengths are showing up for them because they're different and they're going to come to conclusions in a different path, look at things in a different way, do things differently, or what we may even consider backwards, or we're kind of palm to forehead, like, this makes no sense. What is this person thinking? Why can't this get done? So those kind of frustrations that I think can not only show up in our business, but in our personal life, even with our family members, and not recognizing, well, this is how our strengths show up. How did their strengths show up for them?
Yeah, it can be super frustrating if we're living in a world wondering, why can't the person be more like me? So if you have high communication, we're like, why don't they talk and communicate more? And if they have deliberative, disciplined, learner, analytical, they're going to be like, why do those people have to talk so much? Can't they just think about it and then we'll write something up later? And there's the empathy and input, and they are feeling things and responsibility, strength. They take on a lot more stuff than other people, and they're thinking, why not help everybody? Where someone who does not have high responsibility is thinking, I just take care of, I stay in this lane and I'm not going to take that on. So it's very frustrating in one way if you don't understand the other people's strength, but it's really freeing and empowering if you understand other people's strengths and recognize how to honor that, how to communicate with it, how much space and time people need. And one of the things, that I learned when my wife took the Clifton Strengths assessment was she has learner and analytical in her top 5, which means she needs to know a lot more information and she needs to find out what the truth is. So when I come to her with really like a short version of anything, she's asking me all these questions, which used to irritate me, like, why are you going to ask so many questions? But the learner absolutely has to know more. So, and it helped me in sales because when I'm talking with someone and they like, oh, okay, let me research that, let me talk it over, I need to think about it. They really do need to talk it over, think about it, and get more information. That's not a ruse not to buy. That's part of their selling process. So where it used to frustrate me, it's like, okay, how can I help you get that information? Do you want me to send you a video, a link, a document? How can I help you on your learner path to make a decision, either, to buy it or not to buy it? It really depends. So it definitely eliminates some of that frustration when you have that awareness of the people's strength that you're engaging with.
Yeah, and I have experienced that myself, not only with my family, but with my team members, to where, I can identify where they're going to run out of strengths And it has really curbed my frustration because I'm a type of person who I move really fast. I make fast decisions. I'm already at the finish line when people are just stepping over the starting line. And I have several people in my life that as well. So learning more about their strengths on my team or even in my family has allowed me to give them grace and space to show up who they are, and then understand how I can best support them to get there faster. You know, like with my husband, he's got analytical and deliberative in his top 5. And when he needs time to think, you know, I can't ask him, well, have you figured it out yet? Well, what's missing? Well, what part don't you understand? I can't ask him those questions. I need to be in silence, which is really hard for me as someone who has, you know, communication in my top 5, to just sit there and shut up and give them the space to think. But I've realized he gets there faster, you know, in whatever project or conversation we're having, if I just give him that, you know, golden silence that he needs.
Yes, just give him a little time to process all the information, figure out what's true, so he's making decisions with accurate information, and then he can move forward. Yeah, and that's just one of the awareness, you know, and there's the combination. We have these 34 strengths, and asking people and finding out what ways they need to be supported is definitely the fastest way. And whether it's at home or at work, we have people at work who are high strategic. And one of the things that we really recognized was when they're in a meeting with 3 or less people is where they're in their power. And when they get in large groups, it's a little uncomfortable for them. And after, you know, further investigation and kind of interviewing them, what happens is when they get into large groups of like 5 to 10 or even larger, you know, the strategic feels that they're not as impactful because they're trying to help solve issues, and their talent gets diluted because now instead of solving that really quickly by coming up with strategic possibilities, it creates this like long conversation. So their original idea, which was probably the very best idea, now starts to get diluted amongst the crowd, and that's where they kind of feel a little less impactful, and that drains their energy because they have to explain it over and over again to a number of people. So keeping our strategics in smaller groups and smaller teams lets them solve problems and move projects forward much faster.
Yeah, and I can relate with that. Like one of the things that drains my energy at work is when I have to explain myself again and again and again to multiple people, kind of communicating in silos, or if there's something stopping me from getting what I need, like I have to search for something or dig for something, or somebody asks me a question and it's like a half question, and then I have to go find the other information to answer their question. Like those things really frustrate me because I can't get there quickly. And, you know, and then I'm like, why are they putting speed bumps? Like if they're going to ask a question, they should just give me all the data, you know? And so that's something that exhausts me. And I think that can be impactful as a leader and as a business owner is being exhausted and frustration, you know, kind of creating that frustration unintentionally with the things that are happening around us, and not having the tools to understand, you know, how people need information or how they need to be supported.
Yeah, I mean, it gets to the point of frustration. I mean, you know, I'm involved in a few of the green industry Facebook groups. It gets so frustrating for the business owners dealing with their employees and their team, and they end up not having any employees. They end up trying to do as much as they can alone. And a lot of that frustration is not recognizing and having the awareness of the strengths and talents that the people they're hiring. They're trying to hire this perfect person, this perfect robot person that shows up and does everything they say, doesn't ever make a mistake, doesn't ever challenge them, doesn't ever have their own thoughts, and just kind of goes to work, and just that's how it is. And it's very frustrating when you're trying to communicate one way and the other person has a whole different set of strengths and talents, and there's just a lot of conflict and confusion. So helping, and I've had lots of frustration in my career too. I'm not saying I had this figured out. Lots of frustration. I would just have the ability to give people enough strength, space to kind of develop their strengths and then show up and step out of their way. That's one of my developing arranger theme talents, which is in my top 10. But if you are really not that, and you have high strategic and deliberative and discipline and restorative, you really think people should catch on to this much quicker, and it can be very, very stressful for those talents. Right. And especially with like responsibility added to that. So it's very hard for those strength talents to deal with that. People you have to tell stuff to over and over and over again, or spend lots of time training when we get it right away. It's super quick. Mm-hmm. We don't understand why other people are not getting that. So understanding it helps us. Understanding people's theme talents and strengths helps to reduce that frustration.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying too is it brings me back to the concept of expectations. Right. We have expectations in partnerships. So it's expectations of your spouse, expectations of your children, expectations of your employees. And I feel like if we don't understand the strengths and we don't adjust those expectations, it can end up, costing us, like in a bad communication, a bad interaction, a negative outcome of a task or how somebody takes on a role, because they're not receiving our expectations, and then our expectations are going to fail because our expectations aren't realistic of those people because they don't have the strengths.
Right. So we're putting expectations on people from our strengths, mm-hmm. and not from their strengths. So one of the things, and we both know this, the very worst advice that we can give is the very best advice for a challenge or a problem, but advice that our client can't follow through with because they don't have that strength or those strengths. Right. So we need to always give the best advice assigned to their strength and their theme talents, something that they can do. Because if they can't do it, it's not really truly the best advice. Right. And it's the same thing with expectations. If we're giving our clients or even our family, expectations from only our point of view or only our strengths that they can never meet, like, if someone's if they have that strategic thinking and or even executing, right? They want to do things and think about things. But if we're asking them to be the life of the party or talk more or feel more, that's just not in their theme talents. So it's a big struggle if you're going to have the expectation of people who don't have the talents and strengths to deliver on those expectations.
And I feel like that's a big part of leadership, right? Is because we've learned that for every withdrawal from the trust bank, you have to deposit 7 trusts. And that's a lot of deposits of trust, right? For one betrayal of trust withdrawal. And as leaders and business owners, I feel there's a lot of opportunity here to create everybody's best day at work, situation, not only ours, right? Because it's like there's days where we have amazing days. We leave, the office and we're like, this was just a great day, but we may not be able to identify exactly what it is. But if we can have those for ours and for ourselves and our team members, I just can picture, and I've experienced this even with my team, and I know you have with your team, is the trust that's there, the understanding the expectations that's being communicated, kind of how we're showing up for ourselves, how we're showing up for others, and not breaking that trust bank. So, there's a lot of being able to move forward because we're not holding ourselves back with that doubt or that lack of trust amongst our team, or even what the team leaders are requesting of their team members.
And the best day at is a great exercise, the best day at work, the best day on the weekend, the best, date with our husband or wives, or the best date for our children? That's a great question when we ask them, hey, what would the best day at work look like? What would the best date look like? What would the best vacation look like? And then just really listen to what they're saying, and that creates an awareness, even for ourselves. If I put people through the best day at work exercise, and they have to write down what the best day at work for them would look like. What would it feel like? And then we ask people we work with, write down your best day at work. And as they're writing their best day at work, that's how we can support them. Sometimes the best day at work for my landscape manager is an unusual problem arose, and I had to figure out how to solve it. And a best day at work for one of my other managers is if every single thing went according to plan. And, people showed up on time. Everybody came into work. The weather was nice. All the vehicles started and ran. All the machines operated efficiently. Everything, every piece of material that we needed was delivered properly. So he's not looking for challenges. He's looking for his systems to be run correctly. Right. Where I have another manager who just, if there's a challenge on a job, that's his best day at work. Nobody else can solve a problem. That just totally gets him in his, in his energy zone. So asking people, what's your best vacation? For some people, they want to go on a beach and read a book and enjoy the sunshine and the warm breezes coming off the ocean. Other people, they want action. They want to move. So if you have an activator, and someone that want an activator strength is moving and doing, and if they have executing themes in their strength patterns, they want to do stuff. They want to go. They might want to climb a mountain. They want to go zip lining. They want to go, snowboarding. They want to move. So you're listening to that and being respectful of those strengths really helps people in their relationships. So that the best day at work, best day at home, best day on vacation, best date, even for your children, what's the best vacation day look like? And I've heard it so many times. People talk about going to Walt Disney, spend a ton of money going to Walt Disney World, and all the kids want to do is stay at the hotel and play in the pool.
Right.
So our best day on vacation might not be our children's best day. They're so excited to be with mom and dad. They're so excited to be at a hotel with a pool. So that might be their very best day. So it's really that best day at question is really a powerful question.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that's an opportunity to ask your employees in your company, what's the best day at work look like for you? And even ask, our family members that we invest spending time in and going on vacations and things like that is, what does it look like for you? What's a best day for you? And incorporating that. And I think of myself, like, I don't mind traveling. I just don't like to manage the agenda when I travel. I rather somebody else create and manage the agenda. If I have to manage the agenda and kind of feel like, I'm hurting all the cats that are on the trip, then I get frustrated. But when I'm at home and I'm in my business, I am the agenda manager. Like, I'm the one, I'm like, this is the agenda. I create it. We execute it. I get everybody going. But if I'm traveling, it's something where I'm like, nope, I don't want to do that. And it's exhausting to me and it makes me frustrated. And, and then everybody's like, what's this person's problem? We're traveling. We're supposed to be having fun. Why are they so frustrated? So it has helped me identify like where I find my joy in the things that I do, and then what things really create friction for me or even my team, and being able to address that with them and myself.
Yeah, and you want to avoid friction points because it just creates even more stress. And then you've seen it where we've had friction points at work and people cannot think. It creates stress in their body and in their mind, and they stop functioning. Which creates even more frustration for everybody.
Yeah.
Right. And so traveling, you don't like to, that's not your sweet spot. That's my sweet spot. I love to make travel arrangements. I love to, my arranger and developer strengths show up, and my maximizer, my number 5 maximizer shows up. So I'm looking at how do we enhance the travel how do we make it better? So, making all those arrangements, it just gives me a lot of energy to see those plans come together. So whether it's a 3-week trip to Finland or, a week trip to Austin or, doing retreats, I just love planning and scheduling all that. And it just gives me energy to see it come together and make people and elevate the experiences.
Yeah. And I feel like too that, becoming more aware of our strengths, I want to talk about how we do that because for a number of reasons. One, it's brought my awareness up as a leader. There's been questions, kind of posed of like, well, if I do this and I speak to my team members this way, then this is the results that I get. And then they feel like they can't be their true authentic self as a leader, because maybe they're a little rough around the edges or their delivery and their communication lands a certain way, so there can be edges to the strengths, to our strengths that don't land as well. But I feel like, becoming more aware of our strengths allows us to be our true authentic self as a leader, but also be in a cohesive environment to where you're not creating waves so much with people because the way that your communication may be landing or how it's received. So it helps kind of soften our edges in a way without changing who we really are.
Yeah, it really is not to change who we are. It's really to bring out the very best of us and recognize the very best in other people, and then finding a place that we can land and work together, and it reduces a lot of the frustration. So how do we become aware of strengths and the talent themes? There's a process that Gallup developed. It's called Name It, which is an awareness, Claim It, which is to really understand the strengths, and then Aim It, which is to take your awareness in claiming the strength and moving it into an action step. So we don't want to just label people as you're an activator, you're a maximizer, you're empathy, and just leave it there. What we want to do is we want to name it, claim it, and then aim it by making that action step in either to address a challenge, move a project forward, in a relationship. How do I show up with this strength and what do I do with it? So that's really the process. So the name it is really just going through your top 10 strengths and your bottom 5 strengths and just, becoming a little more familiar with what your strength themes mean and how they show up in your life. And there's a process of asking a series of questions, where does that show up for you in your life? What's your favorite theme? What's one that you struggle with? Which one are you having a hard time understanding? So some of the Gallup vocabulary is a little bit different than like street vocabulary. So you have to be a little aware of some of what they're saying is not exactly what everybody would agree with that. Like they have one talent theme, it's called Woo, which is winning others over. And so understanding what that really means, and communication could be verbal, but so communication is the theme talent you and I both have in our top 5. And it could be verbal, but it can also be written. And it could also be how we communicate with our body language. So it's not always just verbal. There's other types of communication that show up. And, depends on your other themes that you have.
Right. And I think a good example of that, which I didn't really think about this until now, but we recently, did an improv exercise with some other business owners, which is really fun to do. And my partner that I was paired up with said something to me, and just by a look that I gave him, he really had nothing else to say and didn't know what to say, and it just stopped him in his tracks. So my communications number 5, which I use a lot, it's like my go-to. And, so that kind of shows how my communication strength, one, I could talk in, in circles with people, but just a look, what that communicated and the impact that it had was kind of comical in itself.
It was. I was there, and it was very funny. And a lot of times we remember that our parents would have a certain look. They'd look over their glasses, or they would look over their shoulder. They wouldn't even have to say anything.
Right.
And they were saying it, and our partners, they'll give us a certain look, and we know, oops, or okay, or so that's just facial expressions is a form of communication, and hugs are a form of communication. High fives or fist bumps. It's a way of communicating to people. Not looking at people or looking at them in the eye is another form of communication. So there's many different forms, and it's the same thing with all of the strengths. There's different forms of restorative and context, which is like history. So like context is a word that is a Gallup strength. So context is really like looking backwards, looking at the past to make decisions, looking at the history to kind of bring that into now. And so being aware of futuristic, what that means, and focus doesn't necessarily mean that you're sitting there and you're able to read 5 books without getting up. Focus means that you're really clear on the direction that you're going toward. And achiever is a term that is more used in the sense of someone that can sit there and do lots of work, lots of data entry, or work on something for a long period of time until it's done. And achievers love lists. They love to cross things out. They love to get
we're energized by more. The more
and task
we're energized by that instead of, and some people, like I have achiever, that's my number 3, and so I like to do things. So the idea of do, go energizes me. My husband's not that way, and I have to be careful not to overwhelm him because my level of go and do. And, so I'm mindful, which I didn't used to be when I was younger, on kind of scooping people up in my own storm. Like I've kind of said, like I'm a tornado, when I come into a space and I can kind of pull everybody in, and versus, kind of just keeping my tornado to myself. And that has been helpful with my family, not to be their worst storm kind of coming in on a daily basis.
Yeah, and that's the awareness. That's the naming it and recognizing it and claiming it, is being aware of it and stepping into that, saying this is how that theme talent, that strength acts and behaves in my world, and that's the claiming of it. And saying how do I feel and think about that strength and theme talent, and how does it like express itself in my daily life.
Yeah, so we first have to become aware by taking an assessment. So a strengths assessment, which we will be sharing, a way that you can do that in our show notes. So you can take a strengths assessment, and then we name it. So we identify what strengths or themes give us energy, and kind of like living that best day, whether it's like at work, at home, on vacation, what that looks like. And then you're saying we claim it. So it's like really learning about the strengths that we have and appreciating that strength. So finding the appreciation and how, our talent themes add value to not only ourselves, our team members, but the people around us. So that's, that claim it. And then how do we aim it? So that's the third step that you shared, is like, now that we know, what our strengths are, and we're owning them and we're appreciating them, and we understand like maybe where we're really good at them, or maybe where our Achilles heel, how do we aim our strengths?
So I'm going to use some of my top 5 strengths. So let's say I'm in sales and I want to do sales. So I have activator, communication, woo, maximizer, individualism in my top 5. So I would say, okay, I need to increase sales, or I have this sales column going on, and I'm going to look at my top 5 and say, which 3 of my top 5 can I use for this sale? In one, I'll choose communication, because I need to talk to the person. I need to kind of find out what his needs are, and that's where my individualism will come in. So I'm going to use my individual talent to find out what does this person need? What would serve them best? So to find out, like, what's your challenge? What's your problem? Can my product or service help you with that challenge or product? So that's going to be my individualization, finding out about the individual and their needs, my communication, and then activator would be to move it forward, is to get on with the sale, to close the sale or not close the sale, but to move it forward, whether it's going to go forward or not, but to not, stand there and just always asking for the sale. That's always, I have that everywhere. When I was doing more sales, was always ask for the sale. And that was my activator, wanting to move it forward. So now if you have another challenge, let's say you have an employee that's not performing and you have a challenge, you have to have this hard, difficult conversation like, hey, you're not meeting our expectations, and I can look in my top 5 or my top 10. In that situation, I would probably look at my top 10 and I would say, okay, I would bring up my arranger and my developer and my individualization and say, okay, what do we need to do to develop your skills and strengths? And then how can you fit into the company now with the current skills and strengths you have? And then I would kind of move him from that. In the individualization, I would step into that to see, how we can support him around that. Again, using my communication for the conversation. So it's really taking those to go, what's the action step? Sitting down, writing that out with the person, but identifying how my naturally occurring theme, talent, and strengths show up and give me energy. So then it's not so exhausting, because it can be exhausting just thinking about having these difficult conversations. Yeah. And it also creates a sense of leadership with other people in your company. They're like, oh, this is how my leader handles these difficult situations. It's, strategic, it's human, it's kind, it's considering the other person's strength and talent. It's not just a hothead. If we've ever had a boss or a leader that's yelling and screaming and just, it's like, what? They look crazy. They look insane. And it's not a leader that you really typically want to follow or be around. Right. And that's where you get companies that have high turnover. They have low employee engagement. Stuff gets stolen, broken. They have high absenteeism, versus a leader that is much more in control and aware of their strengths and talents and the talents and strengths of their team.
Yeah, and I call that it's old school, right? I call it the Mad Men mentality. Yeah. Right. So I don't know who's ever watched that show, Mad Men, but it's very, it's very timely and cultural around what happened during that time and how you did business, and and it was very kind of more aggressive, direct, this old school way of thinking and managing a business, and that is very easy to kind of get caught up in as a business owner, because maybe we were raised that way, or we were influenced by our environment. And I know myself, like, my dad was a man's man. He was very tough. He had high expectations. He voiced his expectations. And if you stepped out of line, it was like a one look type of thing, So in that environment, I didn't really enjoy being in that environment, but it also had an impact on kind of how I came up as a person, and I think it had a huge influence on how I do business and how I've done business. And there's been some parts of it that has helped me be very successful. And then there's other parts of it where I had to kind of unlearn, where I'm like, the iron fist is not the way. How can we find a different way to accomplish this that's less stressful for me and others that I'm leading, or I'm managing in my company, or even with my kids, or, people in my personal life, and kind of learning that. And I think that's part of the challenge is learning or unlearning, ways that we have become accustomed to because how we've been influenced.
Yeah, and old school is the yelling and the pounding of the fists and getting mad at people, and it's just, it's very limiting. It appears to be the easiest and quickest way to do something right at that moment. But then there's apologies after and hurt feelings. And so one of the things that I've worked with my managers is there's immature strengths and mature strengths.
Right.
So you can have an immature strength, like an immature strategic points out what's wrong, and I count on my strategics to tell me what's wrong. But an immature strategic will point out what's wrong to everybody and make them feel like crap. They'll have, they make them feel so bad. It's like they went up, poke them in the eyes, kick them in the shin, and now we have to like fix them up, pick them off the ground, and then we can start moving forward. But a mature strategic has the ability to let people know what's wrong, and the people can keep moving forward. They're like, oh, okay, to the point where they're like thanking them for letting them know what's wrong.
Yeah.
There's no hurt feelings. There's no, nobody has to be picked up off the floor emotionally. Like they destroyed them. Immature strategic will often want to prove how smart they are. And they typically want to make sure that everyone knows they're the smartest person in the room. Where mature strategic, they can do it in a way that people feel wonderful. Like, oh, Christine helped me to realize that if I just called this other person up, we could have a conversation and we could actually collaborate on this and move both of our programs forward. And that's a mature strategic instead of, this painful kind of example of, and I just using strategics because I'm so familiar with them, but like a woo, winning others over, immature woo is everybody knows this person, they're the loud mouth, and they want to impress everybody with these, they're the one-upper story people. You went to 2 beaches, I went to 5 beaches. They always have, you had this car, I had 3 of those cars, or they always have the one-upper. Where mature woo actually wins others over by being interested in them, supporting them, and caring about
connect, them. As well. Like I've seen you do this to where we're in an environment and people might feel uncomfortable or they're not so social. And you have this natural ability to just help people feel connected and, in an environment that is, safe and it's fun. And, so I've seen that as well. And I kind of want to clarify too, because you're saying mature and immature, and what I know you're saying, and I want to clarify this for our listeners, is it's not that the person is immature or that they're mature. It's not kind of how we clarify it, on a day-to-day basis, is like, oh, my teenager is so immature, or that person isn't, immature, or, for their age, they're very mature. It's a development piece of it to where it's very developed and it's been embraced and used in a very positive way to where it's the best of what it is, or it's underdeveloped to where it hasn't been used, in a positive way or in the right ways, or even let's say at all. And so it hasn't had that opportunity or environment to develop and grow kind of into its greatness.
Exactly. The person, you can be a mature person and have a theme talent that's not developed into a strength. So remember earlier I was talking, a strength is really a theme talent, or like what comes natural to you, plus a skill set you've developed and knowledge. So it's over time. So if we're not aware that that's even a theme talent, and we're not building a skill set around it, then we don't get the knowledge and experience that supports that. So it is, it's not that the person is immature. And I have some of my, theme talents that I'm still maturing. I'm still learning skill set that I need to support those, and the knowledge that I need to improve those. So we're always on a path to becoming better with our strengths and theme talents. So it's not that the person is immature, and they could be very mature with one theme talent and very immature with another theme talent, just because they haven't either had the opportunity or the skill set to develop the opportunity to develop that skill set. So
and I've also experienced that immature theme talent can impact our other strengths, theme talents, not to show up in their best self because they're kind of bringing them down or sending them down a different path. So that's something else I myself have experienced, like my responsibility strength. there was a point where I said yes to everything all the time. I was like, yep, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. And then the next thing I know, I am overloaded with what I can do. So I'm doing all these things, but I'm not doing the most important things, And so as an adult, I was like, what do you mean? I'm responsible. But it's like, well, what am I taking responsibility for? And am I enabling others, and am I giving myself the space to do what's most important that I'm great at instead of everything?
Yeah. The responsibility strength can be one of the most exhausting of all the strengths if it's immature, because it's like responsibility Velcro. It's like, I can do that. I'll take that. I can help you. I can help you. And a mature responsibility is more aware of that. It's a really good lead into that. A mature responsibility is where they're aware of where my responsibilities and priorities really lay. Mm-hmm. And I know I can help that person, but is that the best use of my time, energy, right, resources, and talents? And then they really learn how to focus on, because responsibility strength can be so overwhelming, they won't take care of themselves. Yes. And it goes back to, put your oxygen mask on first in an airplane so you can help other people. And an immature responsibility will not do that. They just it's exhausting, and they're never able to help enough people in enough ways.
Right. And I kind of refer to them as like the collector and hoarder of tasks, right? They take on, and then the team is looking around going, why isn't this getting done? And it's not getting done because they're not sharing the responsibility of all the things, with the rest of the team. And so that's, something else I've seen as well. So one of the tricks that I use, and I love this concept, when we identify kind of like an Achilles heel in one of our themes, like something that's holding us back or not allowing us to really kind of step into our own greatness and be who we are, is the basement to the balcony concept of what are the 3 things that I can do to help me say no to something, and then say yes to the right things. And that was one of the things that I did this, it was probably about 6 years ago that I realized, oh my gosh, like I say yes to everything. I won't let things go. At the time, I didn't realize that I had immaturity in my responsibility strength. But then when I identified, this needs to change. And because if I say yes to this stuff, I'm saying no to this stuff. So that was one of the steps that I took, was every time something came across my plate, I would ask myself, which is a Michael Bungay Stanner method, who he's, one of my absolute favorite coaches of all time, is, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? And that was such a strong go-to tool for me that it helped me really understand, if I say yes to these 5 other things, I'm saying no to this one big thing, which is really important. And so that was helpful. And then the next phase was, well, if I say yes to this, is this the best thing I can say yes to at this time? So I kind of developed, the 3 steps of getting out of that rut with taking on everything to taking on the things that would have the biggest impact.
Right. And you brought up so there's another term that Gallup uses, it's your basement or your balcony. So our balcony is when we're taking our strengths and living at the highest level, performing at the highest level with those strengths. And the basement is when we're taking the same exact strengths and not using them correctly or the best way, and it actually can hurt us. Like my maximizer overdoes things. Your responsibility takes on too much. Mm-hmm. Empathy feels everything from everybody instead of the people that are most important to the empathy strength. Restorative wants to fix everything for everybody. And it will be very frustrating to have conversations because when they're listening, a restorative is listening to someone, they just want them to stop so they can tell them how to fix it. And then you'll hear, don't tell me how to fix things. I'm just talking to you. And so if the restorative can't get that under control, that restorative, which could be in the balcony at the highest level, ends up looking and performing and feeling like the basement because it's hurting the relationship. So the strengths can be really powerful in a positive way. They can also be powerful in an unpactful way. It doesn't impact it in a positive way. It hurts our relationships, especially at work and at home. Can really, will be curious. They'll be like, well, why are you telling me if you don't want me to fix it? Well, I just want you to listen because you're part of my life. So you'll have two people that are frustrated and wondering why this isn't working.
Yeah. And I think all of these kind of what we shared, the, basement to the balcony and, understanding the strengths that are immature and, could be our Achilles heel versus mature. These are all great ways to understand, the whole concept of name it, aim it, claim it, and then be able to put action steps to move them forward and even move them forward in their growth. So if we do find something that, is in our top 10 strengths and we're like, man, I should be really good at this. And we're not quite really good at this because it's hindering, our other strengths or even our life, is we could put some action steps in place to make a change, a positive change in that and really kind of step into that greatness. So I love that concept.
Yeah.
So I just kind of want to, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I kind of wanted to summarize what we talked about today. And then I'd really love for you to talk about the offering that you have put up that kind of ties today's conversation together. So we went over today, we talked about strengths, what are strengths, what comes natural to us, where we thrive, and what gives us energy in our day to day. And I love just starting there. Like that's a simple place to kind of start recognizing, what feels good to us. What does that mean? What does that look like? And then you also talked about, like how our strengths can influence us and how they can show up, and I think even how they can impact other people. So the powerful question that you shared is like, what's your best day? What does your best day at work look like? Or even bringing that to your family, which I love that insight, is what's your best vacation look like? What's maybe the best night out look like with your spouse? Or, hey, what's the best birthday party for you look like? Something like that, a special occasion. And then we went over the name it, aim it, name it, claim it, aim it. So that 1, 2, 3 process of identifying, our strengths and our themes, claim it, the appreciate, what our strengths are and how they can add value to ourselves and others. And then the aim it piece of, how can we apply our strongest themes to help us and others achieve our goals. So those actions, what action steps can be put in place to move it forward?
And it's really about action steps, especially in business and in a family. But in business, we need to move things forward. And, people are always going to have struggles and challenges. So if we can help them move things forward faster in a really positive way, we have less turnover, we have higher engagement, we have less frustration as managers, owners, and leaders. And it's also easier to recruit because people want to work for and in places that are going to kind of and support them and feed their strengths and talents. Yeah. So the offer that we're doing is we'll have it down in the links below with the price and the link and everything. So I'm going to we'll have a link sent to you so you can take the Gallup Clifton Strengths. It's all 34th. The strengths will be revealed, and you'll get a theme talent report, your full report from Gallup, and then you'll have a meeting with me, and we're going to go through that name it, claim it, and aim it exercise. So we're going to we're going to develop an awareness around your top 10 strengths and your bottom 5. And then we're going to have you work on exercise to claim those strengths. And then we're going to work on aiming it and come away with what challenge that you're currently facing or what's a big challenge that you want to work on. And then we're going to aim those strengths with action steps. So you'll come away with the Gallup assessment, and then you'll work with me in doing the name it, claim it, and aim it program. So you walk away with an action plan to move a challenge or issue forward.
Yeah, and I want to share too that, Steve, I know you have gotten your certification as a Clifton Strengths coach, and it was something that you were really invested in learning about before. And, you've taught me a lot about it. You've taught my team a lot about it, and even other business owners in our circle. And it is such a powerful way of coaching and really getting your team on board. And I think it's the most power is in our ability, to understand our strengths and show up as true leaders, and by understanding not only our strengths, but others. So I love this offering. I love, the assessment. Everybody on my team and my family has taken it. My professional associates have taken it. We know how we show up in our best. And I also have gotten feedback on people that you have done a coaching session with around strengths, and they have really enjoyed what they learned. So I'm really excited about, this offer and what you're offering, and I think what people can get out of it.
Yeah, I talk about Gallup, Clifton Strengths everywhere I go. I love working with people in enhancing their life and at home and at work, and helping people realize, why they're showing up the way they are and how they can step into that even more, or lean into that, how to use their strength and talent themes to lean into challenges instead of being frustrated. And when I hear the success stories, when they work on things and how quickly they work through projects, that really gives me a lot of energy. And that's why I really like working with this, and taking a little bit of my woo and individualization and activator and communication and maximizer, and giving that out to other people and helping them realize and live their talents and strengths.
Yeah, and I know that you've also done some coaching with some teams with their strengths, and it has really kind of changed the company for the better and how they show up, and the company has even become more productive for it. So
that is really powerful when the teams get together and they're like, oh, that's why that person struggles. Oh, hey, I can help them with that. Or, hey, it's good to get input from people. Oh, most of the team is executing this person's relationship. Oh, that's an excellent point of view. We never looked at it from a relationship theme. So it gives people different themes, awareness, and also it allows other people on your team to step up in a really positive way to help each other, have each other's back, and fulfill that other 20% where the other person doesn't have their strengths. So, most of what I've been working on lately is teams of 4 people, usually a group. I work with each person individually in the name it, claim it, aim it, and then we work together as a team on exercises and creating awareness of how the team can support each other. So that's my favorite, that's my new favorite part, is seeing how teams really can work on these projects and move things forward. And how much better they understand each other. And yes. I can just feel when they're together, the stress and tension, anxiety, it just leaves the room, because they're like, oh, I can help you with that. Instead of what's wrong with you, it becomes, how can I step into my strengths to support you?
Yeah, and I can, speaking from experience, I can say me and myself and my team understanding our strengths, it has made leadership almost effortless. For me as a leader, I don't feel anymore like I'm managing people. I'm not managing people in my company. They're showing up for each other. They're doing what, is within their strengths all the way to the end. And then they know who to hand it off to that can complete it and even make it better. So as a business owner, it takes a lot of time, energy, and even emotional, mental energy to manage a team and to grow a company and, all the things of all the things. And the one thing I can say about, this leading from your strengths concept has made leadership almost effortless. It's not exhausting. It's so much easier and it's so transparent. So I'm excited for anybody who signs up for this. It has given me and my team so much insight on, where we're great, where, our energy comes from and where our focus should be.
Absolutely. I look forward to working with people.
Yeah. So on our next episode, we're going to be talking about another one of my favorite topics that isn't profit first. It's pumpkin planning. So pumpkin planning is another book that Mike Michalowicz wrote. It's another one of my favorite topics. So we're going to unpack the sweet spot of your business. So that will be on our next episode. So tune in then.
Thanks, Christine.
Thanks for listening to the Green Profit Academy Pros Podcast,
the show that digs into the challenges of growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit.